Every Wednesday, for 35 years, my husband locked the back room with a large iron padlock, the kind we use on gates, and I never, ever asked what was inside. Until the day he died, and a woman I had never seen in my life showed up at his funeral, kissed my husband's forehead, and cried as if she owned that body I had shared for more than 3 decades. My name is Margaret Susan Miller. I'm 76 years old, have 5 children, 12 grandchildren, and a story I kept silent for far too long. Today I decided to tell it, because if there's one thing I learned in this difficult life, it's that silence doesn't protect anyone. Silence only feeds lies. And I lived 35 years inside the biggest lie a woman can live. Before I continue my story, I wanted to ask something of you who are listening to me now. If you're identifying with what I'm saying, if you're feeling that tightness in your chest, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, because I want my story to reach other women who might be going through what I went through. And tell me here, in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know if people from all over America are listening to me. You can write your city, your state. It gives me strength to continue telling what I lived through. Well, back to it. I met Joseph Charles in 1961. I had just turned 18. Back then, we lived in a simple neighborhood here in town. My father was a railroad worker, my mother a seamstress. I was the oldest of 6 siblings. We didn't have much, but we had honor. We had a clean name in the neighborhood. Joseph Charles showed up at Sunday Mass. He was a traveling salesman, selling fabrics to stores in small towns. He was 28 years old, 10 years older than me. He was handsome, well-dressed, had a blue Volkswagen Beetle that was the pride of the neighborhood. When he stopped the car in front of the church and got out in that gray suit, everyone looked. And when he looked at me, I felt my legs go weak. My mother got all excited. "Margaret, that young man is looking at you," she said, nudging my ribs. I pretended not to see, but I did. And when Mass was over, he came to talk to my father. He asked permission to invite me for ice cream at the town square with my mother present. Of course. Back then, a good girl didn't go out alone with a boy. The courtship lasted 6 months. 6 months of ice cream at the square on Sundays, conversations at the front gate with my mother sitting in the living room, listening to everything, little letters he sent when he traveled. He was polite, respectful, hard-working. My father approved immediately. "This boy has a future, Margaret. He'll give you a good life." We married in March 1962. It was a simple wedding at the neighborhood church, but it was beautiful. I wore the dress my mother sewed with lace that Joseph Charles himself brought from one of his trips. There were about 50 people, mostly family and neighbors. The reception was in the church hall with sandwiches, cake, and soda. Nothing fancy, but everyone was happy. We went to live in a rented house with 2 bedrooms, living room, kitchen, and bathroom. It wasn't big, but it was ours. I cleaned that house until it sparkled. I waxed the floor every day, washed clothes by hand, cooked everything fresh. I wanted to be the perfect wife, you know? I wanted him to look at me and think, I made the right choice. In the beginning, it was good. He traveled Monday through Friday. I stayed home taking care of the house. When he came back, he brought presents, took me to the movies, we talked. After 6 months of marriage, I got pregnant with my first child, Charles Edward. Oh, what happiness. Joseph Charles was so proud. He bought a wooden crib, painted the room blue, talked to my belly every day. Charles Edward was born in December '62. It was a home birth with a midwife. Back then, hospitals were only for those who had money or high-risk cases. I had my boy in my own bed with my mother on one side and the midwife on the other. When I heard his cry, I cried too. I was a mother. I was 18 years old, and I was a mother. But it was after Charles Edward was born that things started to change. Joseph Charles began to get more serious, more distant. He complained that the house was messy, that the baby cried too much, that I didn't take care of myself anymore. I tried to do everything perfect, but it was hard. A newborn baby is work, doesn't sleep right, nurses every 3 hours. I was always tired, with dark circles, hair pulled back in a crooked bun. One night he came home from a trip and didn't even pick up his son. He threw his suitcase on the floor and went straight to sleep. I stood there with Charles Edward in my arms, feeling invisible. It was the first time I thought, did I marry the right person? But I quickly pushed that thought away. I married in church before God. There was no going back. It was in 1964 that the room story began. We had already moved to a bigger 3-bedroom house because I was pregnant with my second daughter, Vera Louise. Joseph Charles said he needed a room just for himself, to store fabric samples, work papers, his things. I thought it was normal. A working man needs space, I thought. He chose the back room, the smallest in the house. He put in a desk, a metal filing cabinet, shelves, brought boxes and boxes of stuff. I never went in there, he made very clear. Margaret, this room is my office. I don't want anyone messing with my things, not even to clean. I'll clean it myself. I obeyed. A respectable woman obeys her husband. That's what my mother always said. But then the Wednesdays began. Every Wednesday, without fail, Joseph Charles came home at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He normally only came back from trips on Friday, but on Wednesdays he managed to be home. He'd arrive, eat lunch quickly, go straight to the back room and lock the door from the inside. I'd hear the key turning, and then, sometime later, the sound of a padlock being closed from the outside too. He stayed in there until about 7 at night, 4 hours locked up. I heard the sound of papers, sometimes the phone ringing inside. He had put an extension in the room, but I never heard loud conversation voices, never heard music, nothing, just silence and papers. When he came out, he was different. He took a long shower, put on cologne that Paco Rabanne he loved, put on clean clothes, and left. I'm going to take care of some things. I'll be back late, he'd say. And he did come back late, 10, 11 o'clock at night. He'd eat dinner and go to sleep. In the beginning, I asked, Joseph Charles, what do you do locked in that room every Wednesday? He'd look at me with that face of someone who's disappointed, hurt. Margaret, I work like a condemned man to support this house, so you all can have everything. And you don't trust me? You think I'm doing what? You don't respect me? And I felt terrible. I felt like the worst wife in the world. I'd apologize, make the food he liked, try harder, and stop asking. For 35 years, I stopped asking. Wednesdays became routine. I knew that Wednesday he'd come home early, lock himself in the room, come out perfumed, and come back late. I knew and accepted it because that's what a good wife did. Trusted her husband, took care of the house, raised the children. And I raised 5 children practically alone. Charles Edward, Vera Louise, John Paul, Mary Grace, and the youngest, little Peter. 5 mouths to feed, 5 bodies to dress, 5 lives to care for. Joseph Charles supported the house. He did that. There was never a lack of money for food, clothes, medicine. But he wasn't present. He traveled all week, and when he was home, he was distant, quiet, locked in that damned room. Every Wednesday, I became a seamstress, like my mother. I made clothes for other people to help with expenses. I sewed at night, after the children went to sleep, on the singer machine my mother gave me as a wedding gift. The house was always full of scraps, threads, patterns. That was my world. The children, sewing, the house, that's all. Joseph Charles was never violent in hitting me, never raised a hand to me, but there was violence in the way he spoke, in the way he made me feel small, stupid, incapable. When I complained that he traveled too much, he'd say, "Do you want me to stop working and have us go hungry?" When I asked him to spend more time with the children, he'd say, "That's a mother's job. I already do my part, bringing in the support." When I cried from exhaustion, he'd roll his eyes and say, "Every woman takes care of house and children. Why are you the only one complaining?" I was disappearing, becoming a shadow in my own house. My life was waking up at 5 a.m., making coffee, waking the children, getting them ready for school, washing clothes, hanging them on the line, cleaning house, making lunch, sewing orders, picking up children from school, helping with homework, making dinner, giving baths, putting them to bed, sewing a little more, sleeping at midnight, and starting over the next day. And every Wednesday, that routine added his ritual: the locked room, the long shower, the cologne, the mysterious departure. And I never asked again, never again, because I had learned that asking was distrusting, and distrusting was disrespecting, and disrespecting was being a bad wife. And I didn't want to be a bad wife. I wanted that to work out. I had married in church. I had 5 children. I had no choice. The years went by, and I got used to that life. You know when you start accepting things because it's easier than fighting? That was it. I had become a machine for taking care of people, taking care of house, surviving. And Joseph Charles continued with that Wednesday routine without missing a single time. There was a Wednesday in 1973 when little Peter got very sick. He was about 4 years old, had a high fever, vomiting, diarrhea. I was desperate. I called Joseph Charles at work early in the morning. I asked him to come home, that the boy was bad, that I needed help taking him to the doctor. He said he'd come. At 3 p.m. he arrived. My heart was even relieved. But you know what he did? He came in, took a quick look at little Peter, said it was just a virus that would pass, and went straight to that room. He locked the door. He stayed in there for the usual 4 hours, while I held my son burning with fever, putting wet cloths on his forehead, praying for the fever to go down. When he came out, he showered, put on cologne, and said he was going out. I begged, I pleaded. "Joseph Charles, for God's sake, stay home today. Little Peter is very bad. I'm scared." He looked at me with that stone look and said, "Margaret, are you a mother or not? A mother knows how to take care of a sick child. Don't be dramatic. It's just a fever." And he left. He came back at 11 p.m. Little Peter was already better. The fever had gone down, but I had spent the whole day alone, terrified, thinking I was going to lose my son. And he didn't even ask how the boy was when he arrived. He went straight to sleep. That night, I cried a lot. I cried hidden in the bathroom so the children wouldn't hear. And for the first time I thought, he doesn't love me. He never loved me. I'm just the maid who takes care of his house, who warms his bed, who takes care of his children, but I'm not his woman. Not in the sense of being loved, of being seen, of being important. But the next day I got up, made coffee, took care of the children, and went on. Because that's what women did back then. They went on. There was no psychologist, no therapy, no talk of divorce. We married forever, for better and for worse. And my life was only worse disguised as obligation. There were other signs. Signs that today I look back and think how blind I was, how stupid. But at the time I didn't see or didn't want to see. In 1976 I was cleaning his car. It was Saturday. He had traveled and left the Beetle at home. I decided to wash it, wipe it down, leave it smelling good for when he came back. When I wiped the cloth under the seat, I felt something hard. I pulled. It was an earring, a gold hoop earring, pretty, the kind a woman wears to go out, to a party. My heart raced. I stood looking at that earring in my hand, trying to understand. I didn't wear hoop earrings. I only had small ball earrings that my mother gave me. That earring wasn't mine. When Joseph Charles came back from the trip on Friday, I showed him the earring. My hands were shaking. "Joseph Charles, I found this in the car. Whose is it?" He didn't even blink. He took the earring, looked at it, and said with complete naturalness, "Oh, it must be from that client in Riverside, the store owner. I gave her a ride to the bank. She must have dropped it." And he smiled. He smiled at me, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. And I believed because I wanted to believe. Because accepting that that earring belonged to another woman, that my husband was cheating on me, was accepting that my whole life was a lie, and I wasn't ready to accept that. I kept the earring in a drawer. It stayed there for years. Sometimes I'd open the drawer, look at that earring, and close it quickly. I didn't want to think. The phone was also a strange thing. It rang a lot at home. I'd answer, the other side would be silent and hang up. It happened 3-4 times a week, always in the morning, at a time when Joseph Charles was traveling. I'd say, "Hello, hello," and nothing, just silence, and then that click of the phone hanging up. Once I mentioned it to him. "Joseph Charles, someone's calling here a lot, and when I answer the person hangs up. Do you owe someone? Is there some problem I need to know about?" He got irritated. "Margaret, it must be crossed lines. Those phone things from that time were bad. Stop inventing problems where there aren't any." And I stopped talking about it. But the phone kept ringing and hanging up for years, and I kept answering and hearing that silence from the other side. There were also the clothes. Every Wednesday he put on specific clothes. It wasn't his normal work clothes. It was a nicer shirt, better fabric pants, polished shoes, and the cologne. Always that Paco Rabanne, but in excessive quantity. I could smell him throughout the house when he came out of the shower. Once I asked, "Are you going somewhere special today?" He answered dryly, "I'm going to resolve pending matters, my business." And he left. I became a woman without a voice, without opinion, without will of my own. Everything I did was ask permission. "Joseph Charles, can I buy a new dress for myself?" "Joseph Charles, can I visit my mother on Sunday?" "Joseph Charles, can I accept this sewing job that will pay me better?" And the answers were always controlled. "What do you need a new dress for? You don't go out anyway. Your mother can come here. You already make money with sewing. You don't need more work. You need to take better care of the house." I remember once, it must have been 1979, a friend of mine invited me to a birthday party. It was her mother's 50th birthday. There would be cake, snacks, music. I was so excited. It had been years since I went to a party, since I dressed up, since I talked to other people besides the children and sewing clients. I made a new dress for myself. I spent 2 days sewing, being careful with the details. It was a light blue dress, short sleeves, with lace on the collar that I made myself. I looked beautiful in that dress. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I had forgotten existed. The party was on a Saturday night. Joseph Charles was home, wasn't traveling. I arranged everything, left dinner ready. The children had already eaten and were watching television. I went to get ready, took a shower, combed my hair, put on lipstick, put on the new dress. When I came downstairs, Joseph Charles was sitting in the living room reading the newspaper. He looked at me and frowned. "Where do you think you're going?" I answered happily. "To Mrs. Rose's birthday party, Lucy's mother. Remember I told you?" He got up, folded the newspaper, and said in a low but firm voice, "You're not going." I thought I had heard wrong. "What do you mean I'm not going? But I already confirmed. I even made the dress." He interrupted me. "Take off that dress now. A married woman, mother of a family, doesn't go out at night to parties. What example are you going to set for your daughters? Go back there and take off that ridiculous outfit." I was paralyzed. I tried to argue. "But Joseph Charles, it's just a birthday party. There will be other ladies. It's at Mrs. Rose's own house. It's nearby." He didn't let me finish. I said no. Either you respect me or you don't respect me. Choose. I went upstairs crying, took off the dress, put on my nightgown, and went to sleep. I never wore that blue dress again. It stayed in the back of the closet until it rotted with mildew. And my friends stopped inviting me because I never went. I never could. I became isolated. My world was the house, the children, the sewing machine, and that man who controlled me without me realizing I was being controlled. The children grew up. Charles Edward graduated, got a job, got married. Vera Louise also got married. John Paul went away to study. Mary Grace stayed living nearby. Little Peter was the only one still living at home in 1992. He was finishing high school. And during all this time, every Wednesday, without fail, that routine, the locked room, the shower, the cologne, the departure, the late return. I didn't even pay attention anymore. It had become part of life, like brushing teeth or making food. But there was something that happened in 1994 that left me with a flea behind my ear. We were at Sunday Mass, Joseph, Charles, and I. The children no longer lived at home, except Peter, who had gone traveling with friends. It was just the two of us. After Mass, we were leaving, greeting people. A lady I didn't know approached me. She was about 60, graying hair, simple clothes. She looked me right in the eyes and said, "Are you Mr. Joseph Charles's wife?" I answered yes. She kept staring at me with a strange expression between pity and anger. Then she said, "May God bless you," and she walked away quickly. I was confused. I commented to Joseph Charles in the car, "What a strange woman, right? Do you know her?" He was tense, gripping the steering wheel tightly. "I don't know her. She must be crazy. There are a lot of crazy people out there." And he changed the subject, but that woman's look stayed engraved in my head. It was a look of someone who knew something, someone who carried a heavy secret. I spent a few days thinking about it, but then I let it go. It was always like that with me. I let everything go. Life continued dragged, monotonous, joyless. I was in my 50s and felt 80. I was tired of everything, tired of waking up every day to the same routine, to the same cold man, to the same house empty of affection. The grandchildren started being born. Charles Edward gave me 2 grandsons, Vera Louise 3, Mary Grace 4. I lived for those children. When they came to visit me, the house filled with life. I made cake, played, told stories. It was in those moments that I felt truly alive. But when they left, the house returned to silence, and I returned to being that invisible woman, married to a man who barely looked at me, who barely talked to me, who lived locked in that damned room every Wednesday. In 1997, we had been married 35 years. People said, "What a blessed couple, so many years together." If they only knew. If they only knew that together we never really were. We only shared the same roof, the same bed, the same last name. But love, complicity, partnership, none of that existed. I was 63, he was 73, retired, no longer traveling. But Wednesdays continued the same. He'd wake up, have coffee, stay around the house doing things, and when it hit 3 p.m., there he went to the room. He'd lock up, stay until 7, come out, shower, put on cologne, and disappear until late. I wondered what a 73-year-old man does locked in a room every Wednesday. What does he do outside the house every Wednesday night? But I didn't ask out loud because I had learned to be quiet. I had a doctorate in keeping my mouth shut, in swallowing doubts, in pretending everything was fine. Until June 18th, 1997 arrived, a Wednesday, the last normal Wednesday of my life. June 18th, 1997, a cold Wednesday. I remember every detail of that day as if it were today. I woke up early, as always. Made coffee, bread with butter, corn cake left over from the day before. Joseph Charles came down, had coffee in silence, reading the newspaper. We barely talked by then. Days would go by without us exchanging more than half a dozen words. He looked a little pale that morning, complained of chest pain, said it was heartburn, that he had eaten too much at dinner. I offered Boldo tea. He accepted. He drank the tea, belched, said it had gotten better. He went upstairs, spent time shuffling papers, watching television. I spent the morning taking care of my things. I sewed a little. I had an order for 3 dresses from a client who was traveling. I made lunch, rice, beans, beef with onions, tomato salad. At noon, I called him. We ate lunch in silence, as always. He ate quickly, seemed anxious. At 2:30 p.m., he went upstairs, showered, put on clean clothes, brown pants, white shirt, leather belt. I was in the living room folding washed clothes when he came down. He looked at me, nodded, and went straight to that back room. I heard the key turning in the lock from inside, then the sound of the padlock being locked from outside because he had a way to do that. He'd put the padlock on and lock it from inside. Then he'd leave through a gap before closing completely. It was an engineering I never understood right and never wanted to understand. 3 p.m., absolute silence. I continued folding clothes, then went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. I peeled potatoes, chopped onions. The clock on the kitchen wall showed 3:50 when I heard a strange noise coming from the back room. It was a moan, a muffled moan of pain. My heart tightened. I dropped the knife, dried my hand on my apron, went to the room door. "Joseph Charles, is everything okay?" Silence. I knocked on the door. "Joseph Charles, answer me." Nothing. I started getting nervous. I knocked harder. "Joseph Charles, open this door." There was another moan, weaker, and then a dull thud, like something heavy had fallen to the floor. I panicked, started screaming. "Joseph Charles! Joseph Charles!" I shook the door, but it was locked. The padlock was on the outside, but the internal lock was closed. I couldn't open it. I ran to the neighbor's house, Mrs. Nancy, an evangelical lady who lived next door. "Mrs. Nancy, for God's sake, help me. Joseph Charles is feeling bad. He's locked in the room and I can't open the door." She called her husband, Mr. Oscar. They came with me to the house. Mr. Oscar tried to break down the door, but it was thick wood. It wouldn't give. He said he'd have to break it, that there was no other way. He got an axe from his yard and started hitting the door. With each axe blow, I felt like I was going to faint from nerves. When the door gave way, the scene I saw, I'll never forget. Joseph Charles was lying on the floor, face down, hand on his chest, eyes open, mouth slightly open. "Motionless!" I screamed. I screamed so much that the whole neighborhood appeared. Mr. Oscar turned his body over, tried to do chest massage, the kind they teach you to do when someone has cardiac arrest. But it was late. I knew it was late. His skin was already cold. Mrs. Nancy called the ambulance from the health clinic. They took 20 minutes to arrive. When they arrived, they confirmed what I already knew. Massive heart attack. He had died there alone, locked in that damned room on his Wednesday. The paramedics took the body. I stayed there in the middle of the living room, not knowing what to do. The neighbors started arriving, hugged me, gave me sugar water, said it was God's will. I wasn't crying. I was in shock, but I wasn't crying. I called the children. Charles Edward lived in New York, Vera Louise in Philadelphia, John Paul in Miami, Mary Grace here in town. Peter was living in Boston. Everyone said they were coming immediately. The wake was scheduled for the next day, Thursday, at the municipal funeral home. The body would be released from the coroner's office early in the morning. I spent that whole night awake, sitting in the living room, staring at nothing. The neighbors had arranged everything, called the funeral home, arranged the casket, flowers. I didn't have to do anything. I was functioning on automatic. Thursday morning, the children started arriving. Charles Edward arrived first with his wife and 2 children. Vera Louise soon after with the whole family. Mary Grace had arrived at dawn already. John Paul and Peter arrived early in the morning. My house filled with people. Everyone cried. The children cried. The grandchildren cried. I continued without crying. I was empty. Empty of feeling. Empty of tears. Empty of everything. People thought it was shock, and maybe it was. But deep down, very deep down, I think it was relief. Relief that that prison was over. And I felt guilty for feeling relief. What wife feels relief when her husband dies? We arrived at the funeral home at 10 a.m. The casket was open, full of white flowers. Joseph Charles was there, dressed in the navy blue suit he wore on special occasions, neat, with his hands crossed over his chest. He looked like he was sleeping. The funeral home filled up quickly. Family people, people from his old job, neighbors, church acquaintances. Everyone talking about what a good man he was. Hard-working, honest, family man. I sat in the front row of chairs, receiving condolences, listening to sympathies. My feelings, Mrs. Margaret, he was a good man. He's in a better place now. It was noon when she appeared. I was talking to the priest who had come to pray a rosary. I heard the funeral home door open and a woman entered. a woman I had never seen in my life. She must have been in her 50s, younger than me. Brown hair with some white strands, pulled back in a bun, simple black dress, black low shoes, small purse. 2 adult young women came with her, one on each side. The girls must have been in their 20s, 30s, also in black. The woman entered and stopped at the door, looking at the casket, her face contorted with pain. She let out a sob, covered her mouth with her hand, and the 2 girls held her by the arms, supporting her. I kept looking at who that woman was, why she was crying like that, as if she had lost someone very close. She came walking slowly to the casket. The girls came along, each one holding one of her arms. When she got close, she knelt down. She stayed there, kneeling in front of the casket, crying softly. Her hands trembled when she crossed herself. Then she got up, leaned over the casket, and kissed Joseph Charles's forehead. She kissed his forehead with care, with love. She lingered there, with her lips touching his cold forehead. I felt the world spin. Who was that woman who kissed my husband like that? I looked around. Everyone had stopped talking and was looking at the scene. Charles Edward got up from his chair. Vera Louise looked at me confused. The woman moved away from the casket, wiped her tears with a cloth handkerchief, and came in my direction. My heart was racing. She stopped in front of me, looked me in the eyes. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying, and in those eyes I saw a pain that mirrored mine, a pain of someone who had lost someone important. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She tried again. Her voice came out trembling, low. "Are you Margaret?" I nodded. She took a deep breath, tears flowing nonstop. "I'm so sorry, so very sorry." And before I could ask anything, she turned her back and walked away quickly. The 2 girls went after her. I stood there paralyzed, watching her leave through the funeral home door and disappear. Charles Edward came to me. "Mom, who was that woman?" I didn't know what to answer. "I don't know, my son. I have no idea." Vera Louise was also disturbed. How strange, right? The way she cried, the way she kissed Dad. John Paul was suspicious. "This is very weird." The rest of the day passed in a blur. I couldn't stop thinking about that woman. Who was she? How did she know Joseph Charles? Why did she cry like that? Why did she apologize to me? The burial was the next day, Friday, 10 a.m., Municipal Cemetery. Many people went, the whole family, friends, neighbors. The casket was sealed, taken to the grave. The priest prayed the final prayers. The gravediggers started covering the casket with dirt. I looked at that grave swallowing the casket and thought, 35 years next to this man. And I didn't know who he really was. I didn't know what he kept in that room. I didn't know who that woman was who cried for him as if she were a widow. When I got home after the burial, the house was empty. The children had gone to a restaurant. They thought it was better to let me rest. I went in, took off my shoes, sat on the sofa, and looked at the hallway. At the end of the hallway, the door to the back room, the door broken by Mr. Oscar's axe. I got up, walked slowly there. The door was ajar, the wood splintered. I pushed. The room was as Joseph Charles had left it on Wednesday. The desk with papers on top, the metal filing cabinet, the shelves with boxes, and on the floor, near where he had fallen, the padlock. The padlock he used to lock that door for 35 years. I picked up the padlock. It was heavy, made of iron. There was a key hanging on it, the key that the paramedics had used to open when they broke down the door. I looked at that padlock, and all the anger I had kept for 35 years rose up my throat. I threw the padlock at the wall hard. It hit, left a mark on the plaster, fell to the floor with a dry noise, and I started to cry. I cried for the first time since he had died. I cried with rage. Rage at him, rage at myself, rage at that whole life I had wasted. But I still didn't have the courage to search that room. Not yet. I closed the broken door as best I could and left. I went to bed. I slept a heavy sleep, full of nightmares. Saturday morning, The children came to have coffee with me. We talked about procedures, about inventory, about documents. No one mentioned the woman from the funeral, but I saw in everyone's eyes that they were also thinking about her. Sunday night, after everyone left, just me and the silence of the house again, I kept looking at that door. I knew that sometime I'd have to open it, sometime I'd have to discover what my husband hid from me for 35 years. But that Sunday, I still wasn't ready, still didn't have the strength to face the truth. So I left the door closed a few more days, just a few more days of ignorance, because I knew, deep in my soul, that when I opened that door and discovered what was inside, my life would never be the same again. 3 days passed, 3 days that seemed like 3 years. I looked at that broken door in the hallway and felt my stomach turn. I knew I needed to go in there. I knew I needed to arrange things, organize Joseph Charles's documents, see what had to be taken for inventory. But every time I gathered courage, my legs weakened. On Tuesday, a week after his death, the doorbell rang. It was mid-afternoon. I was in the kitchen, stirring a bean broth I wasn't even going to eat. I was just making it to keep my hands busy. When I opened the door, I was startled. It was her, the woman from the funeral. Up close, I could see her face features better. She had light eyes, honey-colored, with wrinkles at the corners. Her hair was loose now, falling on her shoulders. She wore a beige blouse and brown pants. In her hand, a fabric bag. We looked at each other for seconds that seemed eternal. She broke the silence. "Mrs. Margaret, I need to talk to you, please." Her voice came out trembling, loaded with anguish I could feel. My first reaction was to close the door in her face, but something held me. Maybe it was the need to understand. Maybe it was anger wanting a target. I don't know. I opened the door a little more. "Who are you?" She took a deep breath. "My name is Sandra. Sandra Williams. I knew Joseph Charles. We need to talk. Please give me just a few minutes." I let her in. I don't know why. She entered slowly, looking around as if she recognized the place, although I was sure she had never been there. We sat in the living room, facing each other. I didn't offer coffee, didn't offer water, nothing. I just waited for her to speak. Sandra put the bag on the floor, intertwined her fingers in her lap, looked at me, and her eyes filled with tears. "Mrs. Margaret, there's no easy way to say what I came to say. I rehearsed this 1,000 times in my head, but now that I'm here, the words disappear." "Then stop beating around the bush and speak," I said, and the coldness in my voice surprised even me. She nodded, wiped tears with the back of her hand. "I was Joseph Charles's companion for 32 years. The world stopped, literally stopped. I heard what she said, but my brain refused to process. "Companion," I repeated, my voice coming out strange. "We met in 1965. I worked in a fabric store in Riverside. He went there to sell his samples. We started talking. He was kind, attentive. He started going to the store every week. Then he started inviting me for coffee. I was young, 23 years old, alone in the world. My parents had died in an accident. He said he was a widower, that his wife had died in childbirth, that he was alone raising a small child. My blood froze. Widower child. He told you he was a widower?" She nodded, tears flowing. "Yes. He said it had been very difficult, that he had suffered a lot, but that when he met me, he felt he could start over. I believed. I fell in love. In 1966, we went to live together. We rented a small house in Riverside. He said he traveled a lot for work, that he was away Monday through Friday, but that every weekend he was with me, and he was. Every Saturday and Sunday he spent with me." I was shaking with rage, shock, disgust. "He lived with you on weekends?" "Yes, and every Wednesday too. Every Wednesday he arrived in the afternoon, stayed until night. We had dinner together, talked, lived as a couple. He said that Wednesday was the day of the week he could take a break from travel, that it was our special day. Wednesdays. The damned Wednesdays. That locked room, he wasn't locked in there. He locked the door, went out through the back window that faced the yard, took the car he left, parked 2 streets away and went to her, to the other house, the other life. Continue, I said, and my voice came out hoarse. In 1968, I got pregnant. I was so happy. We even had a wedding ceremony in a small church. It wasn't official, but it was valid for me. He gave me a ring, promised to take care of me and the baby forever. Our first daughter was born in March '69, Lucinda. Then came Christina in '72. He was present, Mrs. Margaret. He was a present father, present husband, every weekend with us, every Wednesday with us. He took the girls for walks, helped with homework, went to school meetings. Every word was a stab. He had another family, daughters, 2 daughters he raised, whom he watched grow, for whom he was present. While our 5 children grew up practically without a father because he was always traveling, he was being a real father to her daughters. The girls adored their father. When he had to travel, they got sad, counted the days for him to return. We had a simple life, but we were happy. I worked part-time at the store, took care of the house, the girls. He supported everything. Nothing was ever missing. We went to church every Sunday. The girls studied at good schools, went to college. Lucinda is a teacher. Christina is a nurse. He paid for everything. He went to both their weddings, met the sons-in-law, the grandchildren. I have 3 grandchildren from him, Mrs. Margaret. 3 grandchildren he adored, who played with him every weekend. I was feeling sick, literally feeling sick. I got up, went to the kitchen, drank a glass of water. Sandra came after me. Mrs. Margaret, I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know he had another family. I found out at the funeral. When I got there and saw you, the children, everyone crying, I understood. I understood that he had lied my whole life, that I wasn't the only one, that he had divided his life between 2 families. How did you find out he had died? I managed to ask. He always called Wednesday morning, saying he was going there, and on weekends too he'd call saying he was coming. On Wednesday, June 18th, he didn't call. I thought it was strange, but thought he was busy. In the afternoon, I called his work phone that he had given me. No one answered. I got worried. Thursday morning, I called again. A woman answered, said the office was closed because the owner had passed away. I went into despair. I asked where the wake would be. She gave me the address. I took the girls and came, and when I got there and saw all those people, saw you, I understood everything. We went back to the living room. Sandra took the bag from the floor. I brought this for you to see, for you to believe I'm not making anything up. She started taking things out of the bag and putting them on the coffee table. Photos, dozens of photos. Joseph Charles with her, young, embracing, smiling. Joseph Charles with a baby in his lap, with 2 little girls, with the girls already grown, at birthday parties, graduations, at the daughters' weddings, in a suit next to them, with babies in his arms, the grandchildren. In all the photos, he was smiling, really smiling. That broad smile I rarely saw at home. He looked happy, genuinely happy. There was also Lucinda Williams Miller's birth certificate, Father Joseph Charles Miller, Mother Sandra Williams, and another certificate for Christina Williams Miller. There were letters, love letters he wrote to her over the years. I read some, each word a torture. My beloved Sandra, being away from you is dying a little every day. I can barely wait to get home and hug you. You are my reason for living. He never, ever wrote anything like that to me. Never called me beloved. Never said I was his reason for living. To me, he was cold, distant, controlling. Did he support you alone? I asked. Yes. He paid the house rent, then bought the house in my name, paid all the bills, gave money for groceries for the girls. Nothing was ever missing. He said he made good money from sales, that he could support everything easily. He supported 2 houses, 2 complete families, with the money he made traveling, which later came from retirement, divided between us. And I never knew. And you never suspected? Never thought it was strange that he was only with you on weekends and Wednesdays? I asked, and I know it sounded like an accusation. She lowered her head. I trusted him. He said work was like that he had to travel, that he was a salesman. I saw other women in the same situation, traveling husbands who stayed away all week. I didn't question, and he was so loving, so present when he was with me, that I didn't even think to doubt. The same thing as me, both of us believing, both of us trusting, both of us being deceived. He died on Wednesday, I said. He died locked in that room from where he left to meet you. He died of a heart attack alone on the floor. And you know what's most ironic? I broke down that door to try to save him. Me and the neighbor. We broke the door with an axe to get in and try to save the life of the man who was betraying me for over 30 years. Sandra cried. Cried a lot. Mrs. Margaret, I'm so sorry. Sorry for everything. I didn't know. If I had known, I would never have stayed with him. I'm not a home wrecker. I thought he was free, that I was the only one. And now? I asked. What do you want? Why did you come here to tell me all this? Because you have the right to know the truth and because we need to resolve legal matters. He left assets. The house I live in is in my name. He gave me that. But he has retirement benefits, has the car, has this house here, and he has 7 children, 5 yours, 2 mine, and all have the right to his inheritance. 7 children. Reality fell on me like a truck. My children had 2 sisters they didn't know. They had a whole family they didn't know existed. I need to see that room, Sandra said suddenly. The room from where he left to come see me. I need to understand how he did this. I got up. My legs were wobbly, but I got up. I went to the hallway. She came behind. I stopped in front of the broken door. I pushed. The room had been untouched since that Wednesday. Sandra entered, looked around, went to the window. Where does this window lead to? To the backyard. There's a gate that leads to the back street. She opened the window. He jumped through here, locked the door so you'd think he was inside, and went out the window. He took the car he left on the other street and went to my house. On the way back, he entered through the window again, opened the door, and pretended he had spent the afternoon working in here. 35 years of lies. 35 years going out and coming in through a window like a thief, because that's what he was, a thief. He stole my life, stole her life, stole the truth from the children. Sandra went to the boxes on the shelves, opened one. It was full of photos. Photos of her, of the daughters. He kept our photos here. Our life was kept here, in this room that was the portal between his 2 lives. I opened another box. It had clothes, baby clothes, tiny, folded carefully. From your daughters. Yes, he kept everything. He was sentimental about their things. I opened the desk drawer. There were more letters. I opened a filing cabinet drawer. There were receipts, paid bills, documents, electric and water bills from an address in Riverside. Her house, everything organized, everything kept. At the bottom of the drawer, a manila envelope sealed. I took it. It was heavy. I opened it. Inside was money, a lot of money, stacks of bills. I counted. It was $20,000. A handwritten note from him. For emergencies, S for Sandra. He kept money for her to guarantee that if something happened, she would be protected. I sat in his chair. Sandra sat on the floor. We stayed there in silence, surrounded by the wreckage of a double life. What do we do now? Sandra asked. Now we clean up this room, take all the documents, and resolve this in the most dignified way possible. Our children will have to know the truth. It will hurt, it will be horrible, but they'll have to know. And we'll divide everything he left fairly, because if there's one thing I won't do, it's fight with you. We were both deceived. We're both victims of him, not enemies of each other. Sandra looked at me with gratitude and sadness. Thank you, Mrs. Margaret. Thank you for not hating me. I don't hate you. I hate him. I hate what he did to us, to our children, to our lives. But you and I, we survived him, and now we're going to survive together. We spent the whole afternoon in that room, opening boxes, reading letters, looking at photos, putting together the pieces of a puzzle that formed the complete image of a man that neither of us really knew. Telling my children was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. Harder than enduring 35 years of empty marriage. Harder than discovering the betrayal. Harder than everything. I scheduled a meeting at my house the following Sunday. I called all 5. Charles Edward came from New York with his wife, Vera Louise from Philadelphia, John Paul from Miami. Mary Grace lived nearby. She arrived early. Peter came from Boston. Everyone thought it was to talk about inventory, paperwork, normal things you resolve when someone dies. When everyone was sitting in the living room, I took a deep breath and began. There's something you need to know about your father. Something I discovered this week that will change everything you thought you knew about him, about me, about our family. I saw fear in their eyes. Vera Louise held her husband's hand. Charles Edward leaned forward. I continued, my voice trembling but firm. Your father had another family for 32 years, another woman, 2 other daughters. He divided his life between us and them. Every weekend he said he was traveling. He was with them. Every Wednesday he locked himself in that room. He actually left here and went to their house. You have 2 sisters you don't know, Lucinda and Christina, and 3 nephews. The silence that fell on the room was deafening. No one moved, no one breathed. Then Vera Louise started crying. Not soft crying, but desperate crying, like someone who just had the floor ripped out from under their feet. This isn't true, Charles Edward said, his voice coming out loud, nervous. Mom, you're confused. You're making things up. Grief is making you... I'm not making anything up, I cut him off. The woman came here, brought proof, photos, birth certificates, letters. It's all there in that room. Your father lied to me, lied to her, lied to all of you his whole life. John Paul jumped up. I'm going to that room now. I need to see this with my own eyes. And he went. The others went after him. I stayed sitting in the living room, hearing the screams, the cries, the sound of boxes being opened, papers being shuffled. Half an hour later, they came back, all with faces marked by pain. Mary Grace came to me, knelt, hugged my legs, and cried in my lap like when she was a child. Mom, I'm so sorry. You lived with this man all these years, and he did this to you. Peter was angry, pure rage. I can't believe it. I can't believe he did this. What kind of man does this? What kind of father has another family and hides it from his children? He kicked the wall, punched the table. His wife tried to calm him, but he was out of control. Charles Edward was in shock, just kept repeating, "It can't be, it can't be." Vera Louise cried nonstop. It took hours until everyone calmed down a bit. When we could talk again, I said, "Now you need to decide. Sandra, the other woman, wants to meet you. Her daughters want to meet their brothers. We can do this civilly, or we can do this based on hate and fighting. I chose to do it civilly. She was as much a victim as I was. She didn't know about me. I didn't know about her. Our enemy was won, and he's dead." Charles Edward was the first to speak. Mom is right. We're not going to fight. We're not going to pay for his sins with more suffering. If you can forgive, if you can be dignified like this after everything, we can too. We scheduled a meeting for the following week at my house. Me, my 5 children, Sandra, and her 2 daughters. 7 siblings who were going to meet for the first time because of one man's lie. The day of the meeting arrived. I had made cake, coffee, snacks. I wanted it to be as painless as possible, though I knew it would be horrible anyway. My children arrived first. They were nervous, tense. No one knew what to say. When the doorbell rang and I opened the door, there they were, Sandra, Lucinda, and Christina. The girls were beautiful. Lucinda had Joseph Charles's eyes. Christina had his smile. Seeing those traits I knew so well in strange faces was surreal. They entered slowly. Everyone greeted each other with forced politeness. We sat in the living room, a heavy atmosphere in the air. Sandra broke the silence. I know this is strange for everyone, for us too. Discovering that my father had another family was the worst thing that ever happened in my life, said Lucinda, her voice trembling. For us too, answered Charles Edward. And there, in that living room, little by little, the conversation flowed. They told stories. They discovered that Joseph Charles took Lucinda fishing every Saturday morning, the same thing he did with John Paul when he was little. That he taught Christina to do math at the kitchen table, same as he taught Mary Grace. That he had the same habits, the same quirks, the same phrases in both houses. They discovered they were alike, that they had the same tastes, the same laughs, that they were real brothers and sisters, united by lying blood, but by true pain. That day, something happened, something I never imagined would be possible. A real family began to be born. Not the family that Joseph Charles built on lies, but a family we chose to build on truth. The following months were difficult. The inventory was complicated because there were two families to divide everything. But Sandra and I made sure to sit together with a lawyer and resolve everything fairly. The house where I lived stayed with me and my children. Her house stayed with her and her daughters. It was already in her name anyway. The back retirement money was divided equally among the 7 children. The car was sold and the value divided. There were people who criticized, neighbors who said I should sue Sandra, throw her out, destroy her. People from church who said I was being weak, that I was dishonoring my husband's memory. But you know what I learned? That other people's opinions don't pay my bills, don't heal my wounds, don't bring back my dignity. Sandra and I started meeting for coffee. Once a month, we'd meet at a bakery downtown, talk, vent. We'd cry together, laugh together at the absurd ironies of the situation. She had lost the same man I had discovered the same lie. We had more in common than anyone else in the world could understand. It was at one of those coffees, 6 months after Joseph Charles's death, that she told me something that finally made me feel peace. You know, Margaret, I spent my whole life thinking I was lucky, thinking I had a wonderful husband who loved me, who took care of me. But now I understand that he didn't love me or you. He loved having control. He loved having 2 lives, 2 worlds he completely controlled. We weren't loved, we were possessed. And she was right. He didn't love us. He possessed us. He controlled us. And when he died, we finally became free. I decided to go to therapy. Yes, at 73 I started therapy. Mary Grace took me to a psychologist. At first I thought it was nonsense, rich people stuff, modern people stuff. But after a few sessions, I understood the value. I understood that I had spent my whole life being small, nullifying myself, accepting crumbs and calling it love. I learned that I had been a victim of psychological abuse for decades, that what I called respect was actually control, that what I called obedience was actually oppression, that I had wasted my whole life living for a man who didn't deserve me. But I also learned it wasn't too late to start over. At 73, I started really living. I bought colorful clothes, the kind Joseph Charles never let me wear. I started going out with friends, to movies, theater. I accepted invitations I used to refuse. I went back to sewing, but now for pleasure, not obligation. I made clothes for myself, for my granddaughters, for friends. I even created a Facebook page selling my sewing. It became a success. Orders started pouring in. My relationship with my children improved. They started really seeing me as a woman, not just as a mother. Seeing me as a victim, not as an accomplice. They supported me, encouraged me, helped me grow. And most beautifully, my children and Sandra's daughters created real bonds. Today they talk every week, have family lunches together, the grandchildren play together. Last Christmas, we had dinner all together at my house. 14 people at the table, 2 families that became one, not by the blood of a liar, but by the choice to forgive and rebuild. People ask if I forgave Joseph Charles. The answer is no. I didn't forgive him, because forgiving would be saying what he did was justified. It wasn't. But I freed myself from him. I freed myself from anger, resentment, bitterness, because those things would only imprison me more. Today, at 76, I look back and see a woman who survived, who endured, who got up after being trampled. And I look forward and see possibilities. I see trips I want to take, places I want to know, things I want to learn. Last week I enrolled in a painting class. I never painted in my life, but always wanted to. Joseph Charles said it was a waste of time, money. But you know what? I discovered I'm good. I painted a sunflower painting that turned out beautiful. It's hanging here in my living room. Next month I'm traveling to the beach with Sandra and our daughters. It will be the first trip of my life that isn't obligation, that isn't commitment. It's just pleasure, just joy of being alive. And you know what's the biggest lesson I learned from all this? That it's never too late to open the locked doors of your life. I spent 35 years looking at that padlocked door and choosing not to see, choosing to believe the lie because the truth was too scary. But when I finally broke down that door, when I finally looked truth in the face, I freed myself. Did it hurt? It hurt like nothing ever hurt. It destroyed everything I thought I knew. It destroyed, but it also gave me the chance to rebuild right this time. So if you're listening to me now and you're living a life that doesn't make you happy, that doesn't fulfill you, that doesn't respect you, I tell you one thing. Don't wait 35 years. Don't wait for the other person to die for you to start living. Break down that door now. Face the truth now, because life is too short to be wasted on people who don't deserve you. I wasted 35 years, but the years I have left, those are mine, completely mine. And I'm going to live every day of them with the intensity of someone who knows the value of being free. That back room, I transformed it into a sewing studio. I took everything out that was in there, painted the walls a cheerful yellow, put my sewing machine, my colorful threads, my fabrics. Where there used to be lies and secrets, now there's creation and truth. And every Wednesday, at the time he locked himself in there, I sit in that studio and sew. I sew my new life, stitch by stitch. I sew my freedom. I hem my dignity. And I smile. I smile because I won. I didn't beat him because he doesn't matter anymore. I beat fear, I beat submission, I beat lies. And if this story serves to help one person have courage to face their own locked doors, then it was worth telling. It was worth exposing my pain, my shame, my whole life. Because in the end, we're not defined by what others do to us. We're defined by what we do after. And I chose to rise up. I chose to live. I chose to be happy, despite everything. Today, when I look in the mirror, I see a different woman from 3 years ago. I see a woman with white hair, face marked by time, but eyes shining. Eyes of someone who's truly alive, someone who finally freed herself, someone who finally broke down all the doors and let the light in. And that, my people, is priceless. Freedom is priceless. Truth is priceless. And it's never, ever too late to start over. Before I finish here, I wanted to ask something of you. If this story touched your heart, if you were moved, identified, or know someone who needs to hear this, please like this video. Subscribe to the Grandma's Diary channel to hear more stories like mine. Stories of real women, of overcoming, of pain and new beginnings. And tell me here in the comments, do you have any locked door in your life that needs to be broken down? Are you living in lies out of fear of the truth? Open up to me. We're together in this journey. You don't have to go through everything alone like I did. Share this video with that friend, that cousin, that neighbor who you know is suffering in silence. Sometimes we need to hear another person's story to have courage to change our own story. Thank you so much for listening to me until the end. Thank you for giving me this space to tell my truth. You don't know how much this strengthens me. A kiss to each of your hearts, and remember, it's never too late to be truly happy.